Known as the Queen of the Skies, the Boeing 747 is one of, if not the most iconic commercial aircraft ever flown, but I'm sure you were interested in learning more about its history, so stay tuned. Welcome to GlobeTrotting, your home for aviation analysis. Subscribe and make sure to turn on those post notifications so you do never miss an upload. As one of the most iconic planes ever built and to fly in the skies, the Boeing 747's production life is sadly coming to an end by the end of this calendar year, 2022, excluding of course those specially configured 747s, like the two that will be headed to the United States Air Force to act as Air Force One. Boeing won't build another 747 passenger and or freighter aircraft, however, and it's a changing of the guard. It highlights the direction of the industry and what airlines are demanding of planes in 2022 and onwards. The Boeing 747 is affectionately nicknamed and known as the Queen of the Skies, and has significantly impacted the aviation industry. The first ideas of the Boeing 747 were thought of back in the 1950s by the former Pan Am, when their CEO openly wanted a jet that was 2 times the size of the already existing 707. This was an exciting concept at the time, and while air travel was rapidly accelerated thanks to the development of the 707, wanting something 2 times the size, as you can probably imagine, certainly raised many people's eyebrows. The first designs of the 747 started in the mid-1960s, and by September 30, 1968, the very first 747 rolled out of the brand new Boeing plant, highlighting just how much of a priority this aircraft was, and how quickly they were indeed able to turn it around. This was thanks to the team of the Incredibles. Want to learn more about the Incredibles? Let us know down below in the comments, and we'll be sure to cover it in a separate video, as their story deserves its own video on the channel. On February the 9th, 1969, the first 747 took off from the Boeing field for its first test flight. The first 747 then took off again for delivery to Pan Am on January 22nd, 1970, a turnaround period of just over a year from the first test flight to the conclusion of its testing stages, when it was eventually delivered for commercial service. The first Boeing 747 is nicknamed the City of Everett, a bit of a fun fact for you, and returned to Painfield after 44 years. It was restored and now sits at the Museum of Flight at Seattle's Boeing Field in Washington, for all those that want to experience such an important piece of not only the history at Boeing, but the history of commercial aviation. The 747 does continue to fly with airlines for passenger travel, freighter use, VIP charter, and governments. After 53 years, the Boeing 747 has had multiple variants, with also what has to be mentioned, many other scrapped variants. In numerical order, we have the 747-100 that moves up to the -200, -300, SP, -400, and finally the newest -8. Not to forget the many variants from each of these famous series, including your extended range types and the freighters. Among that, like I briefly touched on, there were many variants that never reached the skies, which we're planning on covering here on GlobeTrotting in the future. The 747 as a family has had over 1,500 orders, and this is a considerable amount for such a large plane that has spanned over, when you think about it, half a century of operations, a feat that not many series can reach, especially nowadays. One of the newest 747 variants is the 747-8 Intercontinental, and subsequently alongside it, the 747-8 Freighter. The first flight of the -8 Freighter was on February 8th, 2010, with the first flight of the -8 Intercontinental, which is for passenger operations, occurring on March 20th, 2011. The -8 family has had 155 total orders. 48 of those are for the -8 Intercontinental, and the rest are for the -8F. What has to be mentioned though is production on the -8 Intercontinental was actually stopped quite a while ago, with very little to no demand for a passenger flying 747 as we moved into the 2010s. However, thankfully, Boeing were able to receive some vital interest and orders for its freighter program, and production to this day continues. However, as mentioned at the beginning, the final 747 is already being worked on, with the last 747, N83GT, going to Atlas Air. The day of the last delivery for the Queen of the Skies will be a historic, sad, but also monumental day to celebrate the achievements of such an iconic plane, the engineering challenges that Boeing have overcome, and so much more. It'll be a day to remember. The future of the 747, all despite this, does look strong in some areas, with many carriers planning on flying them for a more extended period, especially on a freighter side. Older 747s are also still running around the world with smaller freighter operators, seen more in niche destinations. However, the reality is that almost all the 747s that we will be seeing in the future, especially in 8 years, will be freighter aircraft, as many airlines find the 747F one of the best freighters in the world for their operations. Many of us have loved the 747, and yes, we do want it to continue flying forever, but we also need to remember the climate impacts of the 747 and how, as an industry, we have to move forward to more fuel-sustainable airplanes. What fond memories do you have on the Boeing 747, if any? Maybe even you've had the opportunity to plane spot it. Tell us below in the comments, we'd love to hear, and really make the comments a place to celebrate the Boeing 747. Thanks for watching GlobeTrotting. We hope you enjoyed our coverage on the history of the Boeing 747. Do take care, do be safe, and we'll see you next time.